So for this next section, it's going to be sort of rapid fire here for 10 minutes. Then we're going to go into breakout rooms. And then we're going to have a guest speaker here at around 1 o'clock. So my little introduction here, we are going to talk about, I'm going to make myself a little more prominent on the screen here. We are going to talk about complex community health issues versus technical community health issues. We invited Senator Short here today to talk to us about pieces of legislation that are moving forward that we know are going to support the health of Okanogan County and our community health infrastructure. As an Okanogan CHI, we come together around big health issues, working to address deep health inequities, which means we know that legislation, policymaking has very substantial influence on our ability to solve these big issues. Senator Short just shared some big policy pieces fairly quickly with us. We'll make sure and send the recording back to you all. We wanted to introduce a bit of a tool today, and then we're going to talk about this Blake bill, which some of you know more about, as a way for all of us to start to think about how we can solve and come together to shift some of these bigger complex issues. So I am going to share my screen. A few of you have actually been in some of these conversations with us before, and I know that Michelle mentioned we have been using this model quite a bit here within our Okanogan CHI team. So you may be familiar with this, you maybe are not, maybe you've used other terms for this. We're going to talk for just a couple minutes about a clock versus a cloud problem and a clock versus a cloud solution. Similar terms you might have heard would be a technical or an adapt versus an adaptive problem. We're going to use the clock to cloud for a couple of reasons. One, it's being used increasingly in spaces that are thinking about systems transformation and health inequities. And two, we learned about it with Thriving Together, which obviously works across North Central Washington. And it's a great resource for all of us to be leaning on their team and their network, plus introduces a bit of a shared language. So the idea of a clock versus a cloud problem is that a clock is made of individual parts, right? A clock problem is predictable, it's controllable, it's time bound. Just like any clock, if there's a problem with it, you can find the piece and you can fix the piece. That inherently is what a clock problem is. A cloud problem, on the other side of it, is fairly unpredictable. It's hard to control, it's endless and evolving. I might take an example in my own house, right? A clock problem is how to set up a new door on the chicken coop so that they can come in and out and we can also keep out big predators. That's a clock problem. A cloud problem might be how to help my 5-year-old understand his emotions, right? There's lots of layers to it, lots of input, and lots of different elements that I have to think about in order to solve that particular problem. I also may never solve that particular problem, right? It's endless, constantly evolving, and certainly hard to control and unpredictable, much like a cloud. So the other piece that's just worth noting is that in my experience, and I'm sure this is true for you as well, it's actually a spectrum, right? We don't just have a clock problem and a cloud problem. We have lots of things in between. So among these, when there's these two different types of problems, there's also two different types of solutions to each one of these problems. A clock problem, we solve, we fix it, and we do it within a certain number of days. Most organizations spend a lot of time bringing clock solutions to the table, usually trying to fix clock problems. A cloud problem, on the other hand, requires a different type of solution. A cloud problem has lots of networks underneath it. You kind of think about a tree and all the roots underneath it. A cloud problem and a cloud solution involves shifting. It's not necessarily something we're going to solve in the long run. It's a problem that we're going to shift, we're going to evolve, and we're going to build dynamic solutions too. A cloud solution involves healing. It could involve tending to generational trauma, right? It could involve reforming relationships, learning from our history and learning from our past. A cloud solution takes decades, generally speaking. It takes a lot of time to solve a cloud problem. So in many ways, it makes a lot of sense, right? That money organizations spend time solving problems, finding ways to fix them, and doing it in a number of days. A cloud problem and a cloud solution takes more time, takes more capacity, and also takes more collective understanding. Again, this is all along a spectrum. One little piece of note as we look back at this is that we also, and we'll talk about this in our breakout rooms, bring clock solutions, fixing days, to cloud problems. Cloud problems that are deep, that take decades, that formed across time. We're going to talk about this again in our breakout rooms, that when we try to fix what needs healing, or we shouldn't try to fix what needs healing or heal that which can be fixed. So I'm sure all of us have the experience in our community health work, if we're in public health or childcare or housing, of having a really complex problem in front of us and bringing a solid solution to it. Meanwhile, the complex problem persists, or we just fix a small part of it. Or conversely, having a clock problem that just needs to be fixed and bringing more of a healing or shifting approach to it. So on the spectrum of complexity, from a clock problem to a cloud problem, there are targeted solutions. So we'll talk about a specific example that address things that are urgent. And again, this is applying sort of this cloud clock concept to community health. They're urgent, localized, time bounds. And the next step might be a solution at scale. So you have a specific, and again, I'll walk through an example. You have a specific solution on the table, and then you expand it to a population, multiple sites, multiple locations. So you're starting to address it more widespread in a more sustained way. A system innovation is the first step at looking at the underlying pattern and starting to amplify a new pattern. A systems transformation is this deep recognition that lots of connected patterns, people, relationships, norms contributed to that particular clock problem, and all of them have to be engaged in the clock solution. Again, just intuitively, I'm sure you can see that targeted solutions look a lot easier, a lot more straightforward to fix, and whereas cloud solutions seem more complex. And we bring this to you all, not to say we should all be working on cloud solutions, because the truth is we need all of them. We need all sorts of solutions across the spectrum. But instead, to get us to start to think about where we put our resources across the complexity of spectrum, and to ensure that we bring the right resources to the right kind of problem. We're going to talk a little bit about the Blake Bill today, and we'll warm you up to it within this cloud clock dynamic, where it got us as a community, and how we continue to do the cloud work in substance use. So a quick example of the complexity spectrum. So in homelessness, the urgent need might be people are dying from exposure, heat, cold, smoke. A targeted solution would be providing emergency shelter. Perfect example of why a clock solution is necessary. Sometimes you need a clock solution. A widespread need would be that some of the benefits, or if that's emergency shelter, if it's getting people cash so they can stay in their home, starts to run out. So we extend a policy so that people who are in transition can stay in that place a little bit longer. The next layer up, providers, maybe you're choosing more short-term remedies, right? So we're starting to come together and thinking not just about a specific program and an intervention, but we're starting to think about how we shift those incentives or change the policy to support long-term approaches. In a complex system, we know that there's lots of forces that drive and sustain homelessness, which sounds very familiar, I'm sure. In a systems transformation, so in a solution to that cloud type of a problem, a network of people might come together to improve the health of the system by affecting underlying patterns. In Okanogan County, that could be county commissioners, city council folks, direct service providers, people who are experiencing homelessness, substance use provider, mental health providers, people who are working workforce solutions. So this is an example of homelessness on the spectrum of complexity. So I'm going to stop my screen share here for just a moment. And we are going to go into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes and try on some of this clock cloud concepts so that we can set the stage for a very substantive conversation about substance use and particularly the Blake bill. Any questions before I go into breakout rooms that might help clarify this cloud clock concept? Again, it's just one tool as a way to describe a complex problem. There's lots of other ways you could look at it. Okay. All right. Well, we will go into breakout rooms here. My breakout room, if you don't have me in it, I will be in there just a moment. We'll get the rest of the folks assigned. Okay, we'll be back in 10 minutes and then we will hear from a representative from the University of Washington. Actually, a few of you on this call have been in part of this exercise before, which is awesome. So I am going to share my screen again with you. What I just put into the chat box is a Jamboard. Have people ever used a Jamboard before? Yeah. No thumbs up. Yeah. Cool. Okay. If you click on that link, are you able to get into the Jamboard? Can you folks do that? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to start by just doing a little bit of thinking. We're going to try this concept on because then we're going to work with substance use. First, we want to get us all feeling like we understand the idea basically. So the first one here, I'm going to introduce you all in case you don't know how to use the Jamboard actually. On the left-hand tool, all of you should be able to use this Jamboard. So you can create your own sticky notes, or I could create a sticky note for you. Or if you notice me falling behind, you can pop in and make somebody else's sticky note. I'll ask the question. I'll say, what is the clock problem as an example? And my clock problem, like I mentioned, is chicken coop that keeps out bears. That's actually my problem that I'm working on in my house. So that's my clock problem, right? It's something that I know it can be fixed. It's predictable. It's time bound. It's a clock problem that needs a clock solution. What's my cloud problem? So I would take my sticky note, I could pick my color, and I would say, my kid's emotional awareness. Also, genuinely true that my 5-year-old is working on emotional awareness. Lots of layers into it. It's going to keep evolving and keep flowing. So I'm going to turn this over to you all, and you can do one of two things. You can pick your own sticky note and put it on there if you don't feel like talking. It would be ideal if you do. Or you can just give me an example and we'll type it up. We're going to go through this in like 2 to 3 minutes. Be pretty quick. So what is the clock problem in your lives that you can think of that would help us understand what a clock problem is?